Hi, this is Andrew Jordan with Big Picture CPA. One thing that we see a lot is when photographers have their tax returns prepared by someone else, usually they get the return back in like a draft form and they're told, hey, look this over. Let me know if you have any questions and then sign off here and I'll file the return for you. The problem is, like most small business owners, if you don't know what to look for, how can you review that return? We talked with someone just this week and we were looking at his return from last year and we asked him about his rental house that was on his return from last year. And he was so confused because he said, I don't have a rental house. I've never had a rental house. I have no idea where my preparer came up with this stuff. And so because of it, there's like a significant error in his prior year return. He might have to amend. It's expensive. It's a hassle. It's a red flag. Not something you want to go through. But he said, honestly, I didn't even get a copy of my return before I okayed it because I just trusted that preparer. Never do that. Always make sure you get a copy of your tax return before it is filed. And then in this video, we're going to show you what to do to look over that. So when you get your copy of your 1040 back, here are the things you should look at. So we have an example here for you, and this is just in our tax software, but I'm going to show you what your return will basically look like. And a couple things to keep in mind. One is in our example, this photographer is a sole proprietorship. That's because we see this a lot with photographers. Now, once you get to a certain level of success, which actually in this case these guys are, they should totally be looking at becoming an S corporation. Again, this is all fake information, but it's similar to stuff we see all the time here at Big Picture CPA. So we have Ben and Kate Smith. So the first thing to look at, this is called page one of your 1040, and you do want to look it over, especially if you're doing a new preparer this year, someone who's not prepared it before. Just make sure your socials are correct, make sure your names and your addresses are correct, especially if you've moved. You want to make sure all of that information is correct. As you scroll on down, you'll see in this case, we have the husband set up as getting wages from like a regular job, and the wife has this other income, which is from her photography business. Now you see there's some calculations here. They're taking a standard deduction. That'll be the case for most of you guys. And then from there, it's just basically calculations. None of this is super interesting as far as things to review because it's all just calculations. Don't get too hung up on this. The place you really want to look is a couple places. One is down here where it says amount you owe. That's of course an important amount. Another thing is the line right below it. If you have a tax penalty, why do you have a tax penalty? Maybe you need to be making estimated tax payments. Another thing that we see that people get wrong sometimes is line 19. These are your total payments. That includes any estimated taxes you paid, but it also includes withholdings. So in this case, from the husband's W-2, however much he had withheld. So if this number doesn't look right, that would be a good thing to double check as well. Sometimes people do forget as they're preparing to include that amount in there that was withheld. The good news is the government gets a copy of your W-2, so you'll eventually get your money in almost every case. And pretty much automatically, the government will catch it. It just might take a while. This is the heart of what I want you guys to look at. The 1040 is good to double check those few things, but realistically, this is the complexity for you photographers who are sole proprietorships. Schedule C. Now, Big Picture Photography is the name of this business, and it could be an LLC or it could not be an LLC. If they're a sole proprietorship, they'll file this exact same return. And LLCs can be taxed multiple different ways. This confuses people all the time, but one of the ways LLCs can be taxed is as a sole proprietorship. That's the case here. Again, just double check that all this information looks correct. Most photographers, almost everyone, will be cash basis as their counting method. That's the simplest, so that's what we usually see. Now, if you were reviewing this return, if this was your return, here's some things to notice. One is there's this really, did you start the business in 19? No, they didn't. So that one's pretty easy. But this one, did you make any payments in 19 that would require you to file 1099? Yes or no? Well, in this case, the preparer forgot to answer it. That can be a red flag. So you want to make sure it gets answered. And the answer needs to be yes or no, obviously. If you say yes, Then they ask you, did you or will you file all the required 1099s? This is a big deal and it's a big area of enforcement. The IRS feels that one of the reasons there's a huge underpayment of tax, it's billions of dollars, is because people are underreporting income. And it is your obligation as a business owner to issue a 1099 by January 31st in most cases, anytime you're paying an individual or a company that's not a corporation $600 for services, or, and this gets people a lot, for rent. So in this case, these guys have down here, you can see, I'll take these check marks away so you can see a little bit easier. 20B, rental of other business property. This is their studio. This is Kate's studio, but she didn't issue a 1099, or at least she didn't say here that she did. So she would have needed to issue one for rent if for nothing else. Okay, $150,000 total income. And if any of you are saying, oh my goodness, that seems like an astronomical amount, how could I ever get there? We have a lot of clients who are at this level or even higher as single shooters. So these don't have like a big empire of photographers working under them. Single shooter, they're making this or they're making more than this. So totally attainable. I will also say we have people in small markets making this. We have people in rural markets making this. So if you aspire to this and you're not there, man, just want to give a shout out to Ben Hartley, Six Figure Photography. He was nice enough to have us on his podcast. We loved being on his podcast because there's a lot of other good people like this too, just gives so much good information on pricing and positioning and marketing and those kind of things. So if you're not here, invest in yourself some this next year and get there. In this case, then this is the heart of what to look for. And if you say, man, I don't have any idea if these numbers are right, then the first thing to do is get better in touch with your numbers. But even if you say that, and we have this happen again all the time, man, I just don't have any idea what my numbers are because that's not my thing. Well, did you gross $150,000 last year? I don't know if it's 150 exactly yet, but was it about 150? And if you say no, there's no way we grossed even over 100,000 last year. You might have the issue that we see different times, which is photographers accidentally have doubled up their income. We had one person not too long ago who had overpaid by $7,000. That's $7,000 out of her pocket, overpaid because she hired a tax preparer who their only job was to take the numbers from her and put them on these lines. And that's what most tax preparers are paid to do. And you might or might not realize that that's the case, but they're not double checking things. They're not doing things the right way per se. They're taking exactly what you give, unquestioningly putting on the right lines of the return. And so that's what this person did. And it cost this photographer $7,000. So we helped her get that refund and everything is good. And it has a happy ending there. But ballpark here, 150,000, does that feel approximately right? And if it doesn't, ask. It doesn't hurt at all to ask your preparer, where did you get this number? They'll probably say, well, I got it from you, but ask more specifically, like, what did you do? If they say, well, I just took all the deposits from all of your bank statements for the whole year, added them up, and that's my number. But let's say you had been putting money into your business, just contributing money, transferring it from your personal account. Well, you don't want to pay taxes on that because it's not taxable income. That would be a red flag. That would be a conversation you need to have with your preparer before your return is filed. Okay, other things. Car and truck expenses on line 9, this is for mileage, is a huge deduction for photographers. And we get asked a lot too, is mileage better or is taking what's called actual expenses, where you depreciate the vehicle, you take the actual fuel, oil changes, that kind of thing? It totally depends. If you buy an expensive vehicle and if you are going to be driving it mostly for business, like 80-90% for business, actually mileage is usually not as good for you. And so there's like about 8 or 10 different factors. We actually created a spreadsheet to help figure this out for people. Because what we found is we ran the scenarios, and over like the life of a vehicle, if you kept it 5 years, it can make a difference of $10,000 more or less in tax, not in deductions, but like in tax dollars in your pocket. So this, and not just saying, oh, I'll just take mileage, that's what people do. Understanding it critically, that can be huge. So another thing here is if you're a photographer and you don't have anything on this line, you are probably missing one of your bigger deductions. So figure out, Mile IQ is what we recommend for tracking mileage, but make sure you're using it correctly. Also make sure you're not trying to deduct your commuting mileage. That's something we see a lot. Commuting is your first drive of the day, your last drive of the day, unless you have a home office. there's some complexities here. There's some strategies here too. So if you say, man, I just don't have any mileage, it's not something we see very often for photographers, no mileage. So consider that. Contract labor, another thing we'll point out is people we see who are grossing $150,000, $200,000 oftentimes have gotten there because they realize that they're awesome with clients, they're awesome at shooting, they are maybe not the best at editing, maybe they are really good at editing, but they found someone else who can do it just as well, and it's so much faster and it saves them time that then they can do a whole bunch more shoots, and that's how they get the income. And so for $15,000, man, maybe it let them shoot $50,000 more shoots, and sell that many more prints and have that many more sessions, and it's well worth it. So sometimes you have to invest in yourself, and I know as you're getting started it's hard to do that, but as you mature in your business, definitely can be money well spent. Here on line 17, we have legal and professional fees. In this case, 1176 is the exact cost of hiring Big Picture CPA at $98 a month to do your books for a full year. So in this case, this photographer said, you know what? Not only am I going to not do my photoshopping, I don't want to do my books anymore. $98 a month for most photographers, unless you have just a ton of accounts, and that's what it costs for the year. So over here on line 20, we have rent. Another thing that's easy to leave off. Like if you're paying your studio rent, make sure that that gets here on line 20B as a deduction. Another thing I'll say is meals. Sometimes photographers forget about this, but I have yet to really meet a photographer who, or honestly, a small business owner in general, who never has meals or coffee or anything like that with clients or with prospects. Now, there has to be a legitimate business purpose. It has to be documented. So again, if your bookkeeping is not up to snuff, you might be costing yourself hundreds or thousands of dollars losing deductions like this. So don't let that happen to you. So if you have zero on this deductible meals and you say, yeah, that was right for last year, I just don't have any records, well, make this year different. Start keeping those records, start tracking that, because it can add up to a lot and can be a big savings. Then here on line 27A, it says other expenses. Now, in this case, you're going to want to go down, and we'll come back to this part, but skip down a little bit, and you'll have here other expenses. Sometimes this, if you've got a lot of them, will be on a separate schedule. So things like prints might show up here. Sometimes prints are up above in an area called cost of goods sold. The point is you want to make sure that your prints, if you are someone who sells prints, show up somewhere on the return and you see where it is. Also, we're a fan of Rachel Brinke and what she does at the Law Tog. She has something called the Revamp 52, which helps you really organize your business. It's only $99. It's a one-time fee. So we have this example photographer investing in that as well. Let's jump back up to the parts we skipped. This is Schedule C again, just so we reference kind of where we're at. The first page, it's going to calculate something called your tentative profit or loss. There's a section here on line 30 for business use of your home. That's a really hot topic. Is it worth the red flag of getting the deduction? It gets really complicated, guys. I will say if you have a long drive from your house to your studio, if you say rent a studio, and you have something that can qualify as a legitimate home office, it can be a big deduction. It can save thousands of dollars. But for a lot of people, it's more in the hundreds of dollars range. But if you have one, talk to your preparer about it and see what should go on here, perhaps. Also, I would say of all the areas we recommend not being too aggressive with, home office is one because the IRS is really a stickler on the rules. The rules are kind of unreasonably strict on that to begin with. So we have here a cost of goods sold section. You might see something on here like prints, as we said earlier, might go on here. And then here's your vehicle section, which you should always have vehicle section. Make sure that this is answered correctly, because some people, and as they're preparing a return, kind of take a shortcut and they say, well, the right answer, so to speak, here is yes. So we'll just say yes across the board, right? Because that's true for most people, but you want to make sure that, again, like in my example, there's a guy who had filed a return who had a rental house on it that this guy doesn't and has never had a rental house. The problem is you can't really hide behind, well, I don't know what my preparer did. That's just something that he added. That it's not a valid excuse. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse before the law. And that applies here. So it is you who are signing either the return itself or more likely something called an 8879. It gives the preparer permission to electronically file your return. But in signing it, you are basically claiming like it is your return. That's why you have to sign off on it. You are accountable for everything in here. So if you say do not have evidence to support your deduction, this better be marked no. You don't want to lie in writing on a form you sign and send to the federal government. That's a really bad idea. So don't do that. Okay, so this is the end of Schedule C. You can see this total expenses rolls right back up here and gets to your total. Let's jump back to the 1040 and we'll see where that comes in. You can see 109,452. That was the amount from the Schedule C. You guys might have some other things. You can see there's spaces for dividends and interest and all those good things. As you're reviewing the 1040, just make sure those things seem correct. If you said, yeah, I had interest income, make sure that this shows interest income. Maybe you forgot to give that form to your tax preparer and you could end up having a notice and it's a big hassle and you don't want to go through that. So when you get your tax return back this year, please ask your preparer for a copy of it if in first place you don't get it from them. But please watch through this video, review the tax return, look for these things. You could save yourself hundreds or thousands of dollars on your tax preparation. Make sure that it's all correct. It will be well worth your time. I hope this is helpful to you guys. Again, Andrew Jordan from Big Picture CPA. We love serving the photography community with bookkeeping and tax preparation services. I am a CPA and I love photographers. So hope you guys have a great day and enjoyed this. Thank you.